And thank you for joining Caregiving Cafe today. Thanks to Dura Sims and to Heart Hospice, we are able to Zoom. And our speaker today is Christi Cornell with SandwYch.net. And she's going to talk to us about preparing to be a caregiver. But as I mentioned earlier, it's always a good refresher for experienced family caregivers, just to make sure that they're doing the things that can help them to better manage all of their responsibilities and different roles. So I believe she's also going to speak about sandwich generation, which is more and more common nowadays. So thank you so much, Christi, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dora, can you pop up the slideshow?
I can.
Thank you. It's raining hard here, just FYI, and
Really?
Mopac in 22. How about you guys?
I don't
Not
hear
here right now. I'm in Wimberley, so.
Lovely.
I'm going to keep it at this screen if that's okay, just because it's easier for me to scroll down and hit the next.
Sure. Hello, I'm Christi. You can go ahead. Lynn titled this presentation, and I want to say that don't worry, you cannot ever 100% prepare for the caregiving role. That's kind of a hard thing for us planners to have to roll with constant change. But we'll talk a little bit about that. But there are a few things you can do, a few things to know before and during caregiving. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Perfect, Dora.
There we
go. So I heard a little bit about you guys before the recording started. Thank you very much for sharing. And I just want to say that you're very wise to be here, because I think it's part of the human condition to learn collectively. So when you're a part of groups like this, you're just always going to pick up things like you said, Kim, like every single time, like, oh, I can take that little nugget and I may not need it now, but I'll need it in the future, and it will serve you well. So I admire your choice to be here. Who am I? My name's Christi Cornell. I have been working with seniors and I'll call it the aging ecosystem the last 25 years. That means home health, hospice. I was in-home care for 12 years. And now, so I have two. Some people find one dream job. I found two. I work at SandwYch, which is a startup online company. I felt like if I lived in Austin at some point, I had to experience the startup life. So here I am. But I also am the program director for the Capital Area Parkinson's Society, which is really wonderful role that I've really enjoyed being in just a couple of months now. And I have always worked with seniors and their caregivers, and I really have a passion for it. So that's why I do what I do. I have been surprised to find that some people have not heard the term sandwich generation. It's essentially a collective of people raising their children while taking care of aging parents. I realized that a lot of the caregivers who, Kim and Joanne, you may not have children at home. Some of the language, I just want you to flex either for you as a caregiver or you planning as an older adult for yourself. Because a lot of things that are in the SandwYch program is, essentially for both, either someone planning, a caregiver, and an older adult. So who are we? As you can see, most of us are in the sandwich generation. It's very research based. program. Amy Lane is the founder. She's from here in Austin. Deb Nichols is a researcher out. She actually works at Purdue University as a researcher and a professor. And they did a study on 950 caregivers and collected a lot of data to create this programming. What Trang is a pharmacist. Cindy, who also lives in Wimberley, came on because we realized with the sandwich generation that more and more and more folks are not only assisting their parents or their loved one, but they also have IDD children or children who are living with them due to some neurological issue. And so we thought, well, they need some help too in planning, and all of this information applies to them. So we not only, assist kind of the upward generation, but also the downward generation. And that's why Cindy's a part of our team. She's an expert on autism. Oh. So what exactly are we? What do we do? It's an online learning module. So there are 6 little courses that you go through that help you really think through, and we're going to talk about a little more. It's self-paced because we found that caregivers are super busy. And they just, whenever they can find time, it doesn't always fit with some schedule that someone else has set out. So we made the program self-paced, and then it's coupled with an expert. So it's whenever people go through the program, they have me, who's a social worker of 25 years, to email, to have one-on-one meetings, and then group facilitated meetings with other folks who are participating in SandwYch, because then you have all their collective knowledge, you have my knowledge, different learning styles. It just works out for different folks. Okay, so let's think about it. Why plan when the cone of uncertainty feels unimaginable? So Kim, if it's okay if I say, like, it sounds like you have multiple really uncertain situations going on. You have your in-laws across the street who it sounds like are doing okay, but you really don't know where things are going to go with them. You have your parents who, again, are still able to live semi-independently, but you don't know what's going to happen. And then your husband, which, it's like a hurricane, right? But you still want to be prepared and in whatever ways you can. So creating a plan involves addressing some of the barriers you have, and also for yourself and your loved ones. I'm sure that you want to take care of your parents. You want to honor their wishes. You really want them calling the shots on their care. You really want your in-laws, deciding, making the decisions, and you just help facilitate that. That's kind of the whole role of social work in a way, but it's also our role as caregivers. Like, hey, like, we want to share like what we can and will do, but really we want to honor your wishes. So I think that's a really good idea. So let's look at this example. Or if one of you wants to throw up your own family situation, I'm happy we could do that and go on from there. Does anybody want to throw theirs out?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, let's look at Mr. and Mrs. Milton. They're a couple. They've been married 55 years. They have 4 children. 2 sons, 2 daughters. They really want to age in place, and they really don't want to leave their home. They might be okay with downsizing, maybe not, and they definitely don't want to move their hometown. When Mr. Milton was asked, like, who do you think, what's your plan? If you need some help when you're older. And he said, my daughters are going to take care of me. How many of you have heard this from your fathers? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, his spouse is, she doesn't want to be a burden at all. And she doesn't agree with her husband that their daughters should be taking care of them. She respects that their daughters are individuals with their own lives. They do have one married son who lives in the town, but the children live 4 hours away. The other 3 live 4 hours away. They're all work. They're not close to retirement. And they're not planning on moving back to their hometown where their parents are. So there's kind of some immediate issues right away. Does anybody want to point out the obvious ones?
They don't live in the same town and he wants
Yeah.
to stay there.
Yep.
And husband and wife have differing opinions on responsibilities of family members.
Yep.
Assuming that the daughter is the one to care, it's a little bit unfair, I think.
Yeah.
But also when the son is his family, and just because he's there, I don't know, it didn't say that the son would be taking over, but that is often what
Right.
happens.
Right.
Well, and that is such a realistic scenario. Myself, you know, in my mid-50s now, and just doing what I do for a living, I try to plan ahead for if something happens to me. I haven't been married since 1996. So, and it's just me and my kids. I have no other living family really. So I've always assumed my children would be the ones to step up. And now that my son just got married and my daughter's traveling and everything, they have both said to me, you know what, you can't call us for every emergency in your life. You've got to figure out a plan. I was like, well, you were my plan. So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So let's go to the next slide. It's really crucial that the Miltons themselves really kind of think about things, and then the Miltons' children think about what their values are, what makes their lives worth living, what's quality of life to them, and how their values shape their vision. So what we encourage people to think about is, Mr. and Mrs. Milton, what are the most 3 things in your day that make you really happy? You know, is it being together? Is it your home? Is it your pets? Is it your phone call with your next door neighbor that you have every day? Like what is it? And then the same for the children. And then what are your values regarding your parents and what you owe them, right? Because we all have a sense of gratitude, but then also a sense of obligation. Thinking about what makes life worth living, quality of life, and then how does that shape your vision or plan for the future? Both people. And this is thinking about too, I think when you have people who are either super stubborn or have cognitive decline, you're going to face a lot more challenges. But what I like to remind people is they, as a daughter, they may or may not be realistic. But if you figure out what you can do and what you want to do, and you're holding to your own values as a caregiver, then it's going to be an easier road because you can draw your boundaries and you know what you can and can't do, and then you can plan. Does that make sense?
Yes. Especially about drawing your boundaries, which oftentimes are not even there, or because we may not think. I know I didn't think about that until I heard about it a few years ago.
Well, the roles, what I've noticed is the roles change. I don't know if can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Because it's funny, I have 2-year-old grandson, and then I have my dad with dementia, and you watch them and you watch the grandson just soaking up knowledge, just learning. And then you watch dad losing, 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 losing.
Yeah.
And it's just a real kind of juxtaposition to be at and to watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But
you have lots of responsibility, but not always the power or the persuasion to talk them into what you need them to do. So.
right. Right. But if it's, you know, what brings you joy is having 2 hours a day with your grandson, spending every Saturday morning with your grandson, then, you know, that's really, you know, you're going to be taking care of your parents, you know, but
Yeah.
protecting that so you protect yourself in a way.
But it is not easy to strike that balance.
No. Oh God.
It's not just yeah. It sounds much easier than it really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying it's not, but if you have it kind of figured out, you know, how much you can, you know, it was interesting going back to the Miltons, like, well, how, you know, you say your daughters are going to take care of you. Do you mean you expect them to move in with you? Do you mean you expect them to be here 8 hours a day, 2 hours a day? You know, because most people don't, I think most parents do not want their children to give up their lives. You know, so once they really think about it, and then there's some consensus and some compromise, things can flow a little easier.
In our situation, oh, sorry, but I just thought I'd throw one more thing in there. At least from my personal experience, it's definitely something that we did not think about in detail at all. When my dad was dying, he asked my sister, I wasn't there in person, please take care of your mother. So my sister took that like, oh my gosh, she bent over backwards. Of course, we're going to take care of our mother, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
You know, and I think, and of course she said, yes, Dad, of course, yes. We all wanted to take care of Mom, but she took it to heart to the point where she was neglecting her health.
Yeah.
And it was not a pretty picture for 2 years. And
Yeah.
it was like, oh my gosh, I made this promise, you know? So I think, you know, we say and we speak with our heart, from the heart, but we don't really know what the details are.
Yeah.
Our intentions are there, but when you start looking at the nitty gritty, then a lot of times actually you find out, oh, well, I didn't realize how to do this and this and this and that.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yep. With SandwYch, we really include people to really encourage people to look at their support team. And I think we have a tendency to think very superficially about this. But really your support team is not only your spouse and your children and your parents, but it's your neighbors, it's your friends, it's your fellow support group members, it's your church group. People want to help out and support each other. Again, it's reaching back to that human condition. People really do love to help other people, and especially if they are someone important to you. Now, not everybody, we know there's exceptions, but it's really interesting to think about how broad people's support team can be, unless they're, you know, a total one of those people who's completely shy and antisocial, etc. And they want to say yes. The other thing to think about is on your support plan is, so take the Miltons, say they get to end of, you know, later in life, and they wind up where their 3 children are in one of their children's homes. Maybe they wind up in the son's home, but Mom would not want son giving her bath, but she's okay with her daughter doing that, you know, or she's okay with the caregiver doing that. there are different team members and they all have strengths, and it's okay to honor those strengths and think about those strengths, or maybe one child is like, I'm too busy for all this. Well, great. We're all going to support mom and dad equally. Can you chip in financially? There are different ways to look at the different roles. Everybody on your team can and wants to give, but also kind of have to be aware of their abilities and their talents. I'm going to say, when my grandmother was aging, she wound up in the same town as my mother. And my mother was the oldest. And I think it was kind of the old school thinking of oldest daughter, I go to her, she will care for me. But the reality was that her youngest daughter, Sue, would have been a much better caregiver. I mean, my mom did her best and she was amazing. But as far as kind of that caregiving personality and talent and sensitivity, my aunt, who was the youngest child, probably would have been a lot better. So, think about the talents and the willingness and where people are willing to serve and where they're not, and, respecting that. I think we skipped your support plan.
Oh, sorry about that.
It's okay. Or we talked about some of it, the roles, thinking about where you want to age, and if that's financial planning is huge. We don't talk about that because we definitely want to leave that in the hands of the CPAs and the lawyers and, people individually about what they have. But, I know you guys as a caregiver group has probably heard tons and tons and tons about Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits. But it's good to get an idea of what you have and what you don't have. Because they both need to be planned for, right? And then plugging in more support where you need it and don't with the financial planning. And then advanced directives.
The financial conversation is such a hard conversation too. I noticed in what I do for a living, where we have to talk to families about it, but also personally in my own, family experience, where the older generation of family members were like, don't ask people how they make their money. You don't discuss money. And then now there becomes a legitimate, like, well, why are you trying to take my money? It's such a hard conversation. I don't know if you have any tips on how to have that conversation, but that I feel like is something that people need to think about. How do you approach that conversation with your loved one, especially if they're very sensitive to talking about their finances?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a process. It's, and that's why you started earlier. Mom and dad, you don't have to tell us anything as your kids, but we're pretty sure, especially, as Texans, like, you don't want the state running your finances or a guardian. You'd probably prefer one of your children to do that. So maybe please start thinking about that. And we need to do paperwork. That's just because if an accident happens, we need to be prepared for that. If you're unable to act in your own financial interest, who would you want helping with that? I think it's a process, and I get the whole older generation not wanting to talk about that. And it's a process with your siblings as well, if they're involved, whoever else. And I always like to advise family, I know that there are some of my siblings that my parents listen to in a different way than they do me, the baby. I mean, I'll just always be their baby, no matter the fact that I've been working with older adults for 25 years. So you have to put your pride down and say, you know what, if they're going to listen to brother number 2, because for whatever reason, then that's who needs to have the conversation with, just laying down that pride as everybody should be involved. Well, if it's tricky and they're not going to listen to anybody else, then let them handle that. And respect your parents where they're coming from for whatever reason. Because the point is getting a plan together is the bottom line. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yes, yes, and I agree with you, Christy, and what Dura said about the topic, and I mentioned before I'm the eldest of 3, and my brother in the middle. My mother would listen to my brother, even if I said exactly the same words that he did.
Yes.
Oh, well, your brother said. I said, I know, I told you that, or my cousin, because he's a physical therapist, retired. So, but I'm in merchandising, so what would I know, right?
Right.
So, but I get it. So one of the things that, and I think that when it becomes that, it needs to, as a family caregiver, change your caregiving role or your hat, because it's not a personal thing. It's, you put on your chief caregiving officer hat, and what your goal is X, Y, and Z, and in this case, the finances, right? So it's not a personal thing. So I look at it as a project, and this is my goal today, to discuss the finances. So one of the ways that can be brought up as a topic, and I just noticed Eunice joined us. Welcome, Eunice. I'm so glad you're here. Is to, and this was used to talk about grief or advanced planning. It says, oh, I read an article about such and such, and it got me thinking about, wow, I need to start working on that. What about you? And then you can kind of lead into that. Are your, what have you done, or what should I be doing, and maybe discuss it, kind of like if it's a parent, as a teaching opportunity by the parent, and then at least if the parent has thought of this or not.
Yeah.
And then, oh, well, we can work on it together. And I have to point out, you don't have to have really just heard about financial planning or whatever. We are allowed to use therapeutic phyblets to achieve our goals as family caregivers, because it is what helps our loved one, and helps us to provide the care that they need.
I like that term, therapeutic phyblets. That's
Yes, that is a very, very helpful. It was, I learned it it came from the executive director at Area Aging about 10 years ago. I never heard it. I'm like, yeah, that works. It's kind of like too much information, but you don't do it in a devious or malicious way, of course. It's to just achieve something that you're trying to achieve for your loved ones.
Yeah.
And that's part of our role.
Yeah.
Part of our responsibility, to find a way to do what's best for them.
Yep. So kind of segueing right in, if you yourself have kind of gone through and made your plan, and I think especially as caregivers, we see how important it is that we want our decisions honored, make sure they're communicated. And then, having a family meeting is it starts off, people are a little tense. They don't know what's going to happen. They know that decisions may or may not be made that they're uncomfortable with, or their parents are uncomfortable with. And nobody wants to talk about if you get sick and die, or if mom gets sick and die, but we all die. So, this is just thinking about family meetings and using conversation starters. And remembering that if you can't get anywhere, that there are mediators. And some families can't get anywhere. They just can't. There's just too much in their family history, maybe trauma. you know, from all sides that there needs to be a mediator, but, you know, having a plan, having a mediator in once or twice is worth having a plan because it'll save that crisis decision making. So that's just kind of a little conversation starting. Okay. So let's do a little exercise. Who wants to be number one?
Wait, hey.
Anyone?
I'll volunteer if nobody wants to do it.
Okay. What's one goal or skill that needs to be honored and nurtured for one of your family members?
What is on? Oh, okay. So that would be it would be my skill or one of my goals,
Maybe
or for a goal
for one of your family members. Like if you're thinking, Lynn, about you're planning out your aging, if you should get sick or need help, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Think of
Wow.
a family member that has a skill or goal that, you know, could be a part of your plan.
Wow. Okay. So, well, my daughter already said Alec can do it. So she's not going to help a whole lot. So, I guess I would need to have that conversation with my son because he is, well, right now he's near me. I don't know how long that would be, but to actually get down to the nitty gritty and see who would care for either of us, my husband or myself, if anything did happen, because we actually have not talked about it. So they have the will, we have the will, they all know where everything is and all that, but that is definitely, I need to have an answer for that question. So I guess my son, start with him, because he's more available, I guess.
Well, and you might you might also think about it. I know you care for your husband, right? This is your
Yeah.
whole. So you're saying you don't see your son, but maybe there's something he could do to support you in caregiving that he's really good at.
Mhm.
So maybe he loves to drive. You know, maybe he could start with transportation, or maybe he really is a money numbers guy, you know, so he could lift some burden off of you in that way.
Mhm. Oh, I
Um,
know that-
maybe he just brings a smile to your husband's face.
That's what I was just gonna say. Well, he was the one who was a green dinosaur with her
Yeah.
face. He's very entertaining, and he can talk about. So actually, he and my husband are great conversationalists,
Uh-huh.
and so that would give me a break. Let me just exit to the left, and then
Yes.
you know, and then I have a break. Let them
Yeah.
talk about other stuff. So, and then I
Yeah.
can go have a quiet time. So yeah, so I'm going to put that into practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Too, in that situation, something to think about is when you're a caregiver for everybody else, people forget that something could happen to you, and who steps up then to become the caregiver in your place, which is also a conversation that if not had, not just for you, Lynn, but for all people. You know, as females in general, we find ourselves wearing many hats, right? We're the caregivers, we're parents, we're employees, we're housekeepers, we're all of these things, right? And so I think our children grow up seeing us in a way that, well, nothing's ever going to happen to you. You'll always be there to take care of everybody. Well, what if I wasn't there? What if something happened to me? Who then steps up in those roles and takes on those responsibilities? And that's also an important part of I think understanding the skills that others can bring to that, because when you're not anticipating change, that's when change happens. And how do you prepare for that?
True, true. So that definitely will be having that conversation with my family.
And not just you, but all people,
No, I
right?
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the backup plan here?
That's what I have to go work on.
Yes. Yeah.
Because like Dura said, we are the backup.
Yeah.
So, you know, so do we move on to the next one, or do I let somebody else go for the next
Let
question?
someone else go. What are some opportunities to support that goal?
Is that for everybody, did you say?
Yeah. I'm thinking about your support network.
I think a way to find out opportunities to support the goal is just by starting with asking your family members, what are y'all comfortable doing and how can I support that goal? Let them tell you
Yeah.
how to support that goal. Like I said earlier, you know, my children, with all the changes that I've had to make with my move and everything else, and then my son's wife's grandmother moving in with me, and then falling and breaking her hip and blah blah blah. You know, everybody is like, well, don't call us. You know, it's just, you can't call us for every little emergency. And I'm like, okay, so what can I call? What do we consider a little emergency? Breaking a hip, I consider a large emergency, not a little emergency. But let's talk about what these emergencies look like, because I need to then know where is it appropriate or not appropriate to count
Yeah.
on you.
Yeah. How are we supporting each other?
Yeah.
We are all each other's support net. You know, I'm supporting you children, you support me. Like it's how do we support each other, and how do you want to contribute to caregiving?
And what do
if
you
they say
consider,
no,
what do you consider large? A large problem or a little problem? Like, am
Yeah.
am I in the hospital and they're about to pull the support plugs, and that's a problem to call you on? That's a large problem, but anything under there isn't.
yeah, yeah,
I am learning that it is very different. I guess I've gotten old, but the generations treat it very differently. How they come to the rescue, or how they help or don't help. And the younger generation is much better at setting boundaries than we are. I'm just here to tell you.
Yeah. And it's okay. It's not that
Yeah,
it's
and
not
it's
okay,
good that
right?
they need
It's
to.
just that we then my idea of you know, a big problem has been, you stumped your toe, let me get over there and put some ice on it for you.
Yeah.
That's a big problem, where you know, their idea of a big problem is what I would have considered life or death.
Right.
So it's really understanding what is your idea of when it's appropriate to need your help, type thing. And it's okay, I just need to know, because I get frustrated. I feel well, you're making me feel like a burden, versus you know, well, I've been there for you my whole life. So it's really is important to have those conversations, because
Yeah.
like you said earlier, Christy, you got to drop the pride, because at the end of the day, it's about coming up with a plan, not
Right.
not about, well, I did this for you, you should do that for me, well, I expect that of you. I get to, you know, it really is okay. Let's put all that aside and let's come up with a real plan, because
Yeah.
anything can happen at any minute of the day for any one of us, and we better have a plan.
yeah,
I think also, and I'm, you know, my family is the only family I have, as in blood relatives. And I think it also depends very much on the family dynamics, what you're used to, how things get worked out. Because I know that I can call my brother or my sister for anything. I broke a nail. My brother will probably laugh at me because he's surrounded by women. He had three girls and a wife. Oh, well, you know, you can put some whatever. It's not, I don't have to define what is big or small. I just
That's
put it out there. And if they can do something, they will, and they will offer it. And if they can't, they won't. I mean, they'll just say, I'll pray for you. You know, so but I think it's that's just my family. That's how my family works. And that's been working for me. But I think that it's important to look at, how do you resolve things? How do you decide on things? How open are you in your family, to discuss hard topics.
Yeah.
I'm blessed that I have the family that I have, that I can just say whatever,
Yeah.
but I realize that not everybody's family is like that.
Yeah. So think about how are you mentally supporting yourself and then your own family members?
I'm still figuring that out. Don't know that one yet.
And I think we're bad at it.
Mhm.
I think, as a social worker, I still get migraine headaches because I, have a million things that hit me that I need to take care of, as a mom, as a professional, as a wife, like, and I still stress out, like, which clearly shows that maybe I'm not taking care of myself, or, so I don't know why that's such a work in progress. And again, I think that's a female thing,
Mhm.
but mentally supporting oneself.
I would like to welcome Eunice, and hello Eunice, I'm glad you joined us, but I think Eunice might be able to answer that question quite well.
Hi, Eunice.
Hello. I don't know.
I had to scan down.
I don't know. I'm still working on that myself. From in the beginning, everybody's on board. Everybody's all excited. Everybody has everything. They have the right answers and everything. But later on down the road, everybody thins out. So I've given everybody the do's and don'ts as far as I'm concerned. I have everything in place that I do have, and I tell them where it is. So I don't know. And I have a granddaughter-in-law, and she's been reaching out a lot lately. So maybe I can kind of put a little bug in her ear. Let's get something in, let's get something rolling as far as what the future is going to hold for us. Because sometimes, it's like, at first I was the worst thing on the earth when my husband first went down, and now, where are the girls? They're doing their own thing, so I don't know if I have the answer to that right now. I'm still working on it. So I tell them if something happens to me, here's A, here's B, here's C. So they already know what I want. So I don't know, I'll just have to go from there. So I don't have the answer.
And it's evolutionary, right? Like it's something, mental support for yourself and for your families. It's evolving constantly because life is changing constantly. And and it's one of those things that you have to be ready to move with it as life changes, I think. And again, it really is a challenge because we're taught, in our culture that looking out for yourself and putting boundaries and doing things like that is selfish.
Mhm.
And nobody wants to be selfish. We want to at least appear to be caring and so people shy away from the real. And as you said, Kim, earlier, this younger generation's good at setting boundaries. I think they're recognizing more so than our generation and older generations that it isn't selfish to take care of yourself. It's the airplane philosophy, right? Put the mask on yourself so that you can save others. But so many of our generation and older were taught that it is selfish not to give of yourself, of your time, of your resources, of everything. And so I think it's much harder for a certain generation, 40s, 50s, 60s and up to support themselves mentally than it is for the younger generation.
Yeah.
And so again, that part of it is evolving as well.
Yeah.
Yes. And at the same time, I respect their boundaries and everything. I respect what they have to do because, life doesn't stop for any of us. We have to do what we have to do. So at the same time, here I am, mom, and I still, know that everybody have their life to live. And, but I don't want to be a burden to anybody in any kind of way. So I just do what I do. And, that's why they know what I want. So, and when my daughter told me years ago, one, but I said, well, Mama, when you die, you're not gonna know what's going on. I said, but I'm asking you to respect my wishes right now. So that's what you should be able to do. So, but the younger generations, they are a different breed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know that, because we've talked about it with Eunice before, that you did set some boundaries and you made some commitments to yourself.
Yes.
So you saw that where you were was not a really great place. So you did something about it. And that was by looking in. And when it says, how are you mentally supporting yourself? That's part of it. You know, you chose to support yourself, you know.
Yes.
And then, I mean, I know Dura and I saw this huge change which we've discussed. So I think that part of it is and this I learned because I'm not one of those people that, okay, let me see how I'm doing. I've just never thought that way. But I read in, you know, probably Teepa Snow or Tam Cummings or one of those caregiving webinars that said, stop for a second and ask yourself, how am I feeling today, right now? And take note of that. And I never did that, you know, so, but I do it now. And I'm like, especially when my mother was here, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. And I still have, you know, a couple more hours of stuff that I need to do, and I'm ready for bed, you know. And that's kind of when it started surfacing. So just to stop wherever during the day, night, whenever, and says, how am I doing right now? You know, and that's how you can start to acknowledge. First, you're checking in with yourself, and then you pay attention. How am I feeling right now? Am I happy, sad, angry, whatever, exhausted, energetic? And then you say, okay, what can I do? You know, and then that addresses the mentally supporting yourself. Do I need a break? Do I need a cup of tea? Do I need a walk? Do I need, you know, do I need to call a friend? Do I need to pray? You know, and then you can get others involved if you choose to, if you decide that that's what you need.
Yep. This is our second to last slide. This is just things that we do. If you know someone who is, I think you guys are all deep in your process. But these are things that we try to do for the family caregiver or the elder adult who's trying to plan and, you know, get ready for aging. You know, in the event a crisis happens, which, I mean, unfortunately, healthcare crises seem to occur more and more and more as we age. It just seems our bodies break down. So these are things that we help with. If you want to get a hold of me, the last slide talks about if you have questions, how to get a hold of me.
And I guess it would also be good to visit the website, SandwYch.net.
Yep.
Just get a little bit more of an idea of what's going on. And obviously, I think the best thing to get more details would be to speak with Christi and maybe talk about your own caregiving situation and see how she might be able to help.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thank you. See, anybody have any comments, questions for Christi at the moment? You want to share something that relates to what was presented? And
I just thought it was
Joanne,
a great
not to
presentation. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. I loved it. Joanne, being that you're in a way kind of new to the more direct caregiving role, but although you've been involved ever since, any comments or questions that you might have?
No, this has been helpful. I think especially like when we have to realize when you have a group of children that are trying to arrange the caregiving, that not everybody can give the same thing. And some people, just try to focus on what they can.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
What I learned a long time ago was, and again, from the information I get is usually either from experience, but most of it is from other professionals that have presented on the topics of caregiving or dementia or aging. So it's, I'm not making it up, but if you need, as a family caregiver, make a list, and we've talked about this before, make a list of everything you need, from the tiniest thing to changing a light bulb in the closet to a vacation in, the Mediterranean, so make a list. And when somebody offers, oh, I wish I could help you, here's a list. Pick something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is one way. That way you're not telling, okay, and you can prioritize. Is this like urgent or desperately need help with this? I need a haircut, and that's because that makes me feel good. And I need a break. I need 3 hours, Wednesday afternoon. So put it all in there and then let people pick, and that can also be for a long distance or a phone call to your loved one or to you. You can schedule all these things. There are a lot of things, but that way, because that has been a barrier from what I have heard over the years of not offering support, because the family caregiver usually says, everything's fine, I'm fine, thank you, I'll let you know when I need something. And of course, they seldom call for help. And then the person who would like to help would really like to help, but doesn't know how. And if they just do something to help, it may be the wrong thing or at the wrong time. So if we get really practical, and the family caregiver knows usually what he or she needs, here's a list. So that I have read about has worked well, and that actually, in my experience, it has worked well. So, but that's just an idea.
Thank you guys so much for letting me visit with y'all today. Best of luck on your caregiving journey.
Yes.
Yes, peace. Peace to you on a daily basis. I know that is hard to come by, and we all need it.
Have a good trip.
Thank you so much, Christy, and I look forward to staying in touch. I know we'll see you again when we talk about, or you talk about, CAPS and Parkinson's later this year.
Yeah.
See what's going on in that arena. But anyway, Caregiving Cafe is here for all family caregivers. So if you find other families that might welcome some support, Drew and I are here for them, as our wonderful family caregivers. It's always good to connect.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
All right. Thank you. Keep cool.
Bye. Good to see you again.
Bye.
Bye, Dora.
All right. So we can stop the recording.